The throbbing behind my eyes felt like a jackhammer operator had taken up residence in my skull. Another one of those damn migraines. The quacks at the Phoenix VA kept saying, "It's the titanium plate, Mr. Callahan." Bullshit. That plate's been part of me since Key Sand in '68. A goddamn souvenir of a mortar attack that nearly erased me. This pain, this pressure, started 5 months ago. Coincidentally, around the time my wife, Sarah, landed a job as a paralegal at that slick downtown law firm, Sterling and Finch. My name's Jake Callahan. I was a Marine, a grunt, back when Southeast Asia was the hottest tourist destination for Uncle Sam's boys. I caught a mortar round meant for someone else. Ended up with a skull full of shrapnel and a lifetime pass to the Veterans Affairs Medical Circus. After months of rehab and enough therapy to fill a goddamn library, I limped back home to Arizona. Disability checks weren't going to cut it, not in this economy. So I swallowed my pride and went back to school, earned myself a certification in heavy equipment operation. Now, I work for Maricopa County Roads Department. Usually, you'll find me on a grader or a water truck, keeping the desert roads smooth. Today was a professional development day, code for hours of mandatory training on new regulations. I sat there, listening to some pencil pusher drone on about environmental impact assessments, and the pressure in my head started building like a monsoon storm. I told my boss I needed a split. He knows about my condition, as he politely calls it. I didn't buy the official VA diagnosis. I felt it in my gut. This headache, this gnawing anxiety, it wasn't titanium. It was a disturbance in the damn force. 6 months ago, Sarah, my wife of 6 years, decided she wanted to join the workforce. I tried to reason with her. We had a good life. The ranch had been in my family for generations. My disability, my job, we were comfortable. But Sarah, she insisted. She said she needed something more than horses and cacti. So, she got a job at Sterling and Finch as a paralegal. I warned her about Daniel Sterling, the founder's son. I knew him from high school. He was tall, handsome, and born with a silver goddamn spoon in his mouth. But he was also a notorious womanizer. He dated every cheerleader, every homecoming queen, and bragged about it in the locker room. I remember him strutting around after football practice, flaunting what he considered a national treasure. "No girl can resist this," he'd say, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Rich kids go to college. Poor kids go to war. That's the story of America in a nutshell." While I was getting blown to hell, he was getting a law degree. Now, he was a hotshot lawyer, and I was a guy with a metal plate in his head, trying to keep his marriage from falling apart. Last night, Sarah and I had another argument. I wanted to start a family. She wanted to wait. How much longer? She couldn't say. She'd look away, her blue eyes suddenly cloudy. Something was wrong, and I was starting to suspect the worst. Sarah, I met her at a country music festival near Scottsdale. She was a city girl from Chicago, visiting her aunt. She had a spark in her eyes, a kind of naive optimism that I found strangely endearing. She'd worked as a waitress since she was 16. She wasn't a virgin, and I didn't care. I wasn't either. We dated for almost 2 years before I proposed. She'd never lived on a ranch, but she told me it was her dream. Wide open spaces, horses, a garden full of flowers. "I want 4 kids, Jake," she'd say, her eyes shining. "A big family, a happy home. We got married under a giant oak tree on the ranch. The first few years were like something out of a country song. I bought her a Palomino mare named Goldie, and we'd ride out into the desert, the sun setting behind the Superstition Mountains. We even started doing overnight camping trips. Then the restlessness set in. She started talking about needing more money, more excitement, more goddamn stimulation. That's when she decided she wanted to go to work. I suspected something, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I tried to be understanding. I told myself it was just a phase. I'm 6 feet tall, 200 pounds, and I stay in shape. Sarah is 5'9", maybe 120 pounds. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a smile that could melt glaciers. We both drive decent cars. Me, a Ford F-250. Sarah, a pearl white Lexus SUV. We had a good life. Why couldn't she just be happy? The closer I got to the ranch, the stronger the feeling grew. It was like static electricity crackling in the air. I turned the corner onto our dirt road, and there it was, a blue Corvette parked in front of my house. Daniel Sterling's Corvette. My heart hammered against my ribs. I cut the engine and coasted to a stop. In the glove box was my .45 caliber Colt 1911, a relic from my Marine days, a reminder of a life I couldn't escape. I took it out, the cold steel familiar in my hand. I chambered a round. Today, this goddamn thing ends. I went through the side door, the one we always left unlocked. I eased into the den. I heard them in our bedroom. My stomach twisted into knots. I started down the hall when I saw a letter on the coffee table, addressed to me. My name was written in Sarah's loopy handwriting. Quietly, I picked it up and read, "Jake, I don't know how to say this. I did love you once. I'm sorry about all of this, but it is what it is. I met Daniel about 8 months ago at a charity gala. He bought me a drink, and we talked. He was charming, funny, and, well, you know Daniel. He's Daniel Sterling. We started having lunch together, then drinks after work. He took me to his place a few times. He was so kind. He was so good at listening to me. That job opening at his office, he made it happen. We've been seeing each other 2 or 3 times a week, either at his office or at his condo. He even bought me a horse of my own to ride at his ranch in northern Arizona. Those late nights, the excuses about needing to work, the shopping trips to Scottsdale, they were all with him. I think I'm falling in love with him. He's going to San Diego next week to meet with a big corporate client, and he wants me to go with him. A week in California, sun, sand, and maybe a new life together. When we get back, I'm going to file for divorce and move in with him. We'll be gone for a week. It'll give you time to cool down. I know how you can get, Jake. I'm really sorry to hurt you like this, but I can't live a lie anymore. You deserve someone who can love you fully. Please try to understand. Sarah, understand? I will never understand. I stalked down the hall and stood at the bedroom door. The hinges creaked slightly. Daniel Sterling was on top of her, his expensive suit pants around his ankles. They didn't hear me at first. They were too engrossed in their little drama. I tapped the door with the barrel of the .45. They both looked up, their faces frozen in horror. Daniel jumped up, scrambling to cover himself. "Jake, what the hell? Put that gun down, man. Let's talk about this." He smirked, trying to regain his composure. "We can work something out." "Shut up, Daniel. Just stand there." I stared at Sarah. Her eyes were wide with fear, her face streaked with tears. "Jake, please," she begged. "Just let us go. I'll divorce you. I don't want anything. Please, just let us leave. I read your letter, Sarah. All that bullshit about Daniel being so charming. You're leaving me for a rich asshole, and you expect me to just walk away." I looked at Daniel. He was still smirking. That's when something snapped inside me. I fired a shot over his head, into the wall. Plaster exploded. Sarah screamed, "Jake, please. Don't do this." I lowered the gun and took a deep breath. This was the man who stole my wife. He was a reason for all the pain, the headaches, the anxiety. I aimed a shot an inch above Daniel's crotch and fired. All hell broke loose. Daniel screamed like a banshee, clutching at his groin, his face contorted in agony. He dropped to his knees beside the bed, bleeding profusely. He started vomiting, his expensive breakfast splattering across the floor. He rolled over on his side, whimpering. Sarah was sitting on the bed, knees drawn up to her chest. She stared at me, her eyes filled with terror and something else. Something I couldn't quite decipher. "You read the letter?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Yeah," I replied. "You left out one key point. This isn't about love. It's about money, isn't it? Daniel's money." "Jake, please," she sobbed. "I need an ambulance." I looked down at Daniel, writhing on the floor. "No," I said. "You don't need an ambulance. You need a grave." My next round hit him square in the left eye. Blood and brain matter splattered across the wall. He was dead before he hit the floor. Sarah was suddenly quiet. "Jake, please," she said, her voice strangely calm. "I never gave him everything. Those days we did. I had a headache, or it was that time of the month. I did everything I could think of to stop you from finding out about us. What was this cheating woman thinking? That maybe I would forgive her, and we would live happily ever after." She smiled. I smiled back at her, said a single word, and fired. My next shot hit her in the forehead. She fell back on the bed without another word. I wrapped their bodies in sheets from the bed. I carried Daniel out to the Corvette first. I put him in the passenger seat, naked, bloody, and dead. Then I went back for Sarah. I put her in the seat beside him. A matching set. I found Daniel's keys in his pants pocket. I drove the Corvette out behind the barn, to the edge of the property, where no one could see it from the road. I went back to the house. I cleaned up the bedroom as best I could. The smell of vomit was overpowering. I opened the windows and sprayed air freshener. I stuffed all the bloody towels and clothes into a garbage bag. Next, I went to the barn and started the backhoe. In less than 2 hours, everything was buried. The car, the bodies, the garbage bags. I covered it all up with dirt and rocks. I figured there was no use saying words over them. The devil didn't want to hear them. I went back to the house and called the sheriff's office. I got Sheriff Brody on the phone. I explained that I had found a letter from Sarah saying she was running off with Daniel Sterling. I asked his advice on what to do. "Well, Jake," he said, "call a divorce attorney and get things rolling. When they get back, get them served. It's best to get out in front of things like this." I hung up and called an attorney in Flagstaff. I made an appointment for the next day. I took the letter with me. She made copies. It was in Sarah's handwriting, so it was made an exhibit. She would have the papers ready when they returned. I packed all of Sarah's stuff up in plastic garbage bags and set them beside her car in the garage. I even changed the sheets, and the whole house, for a week or so, smelled of lavender, the scent of Sarah, now a requiem for her life. The next day, I was back grading roads. The feeling in my head was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness. The world seemed a little quieter, a little less vibrant. The force was back to normal. Of course, they didn't return for a week. In 10 days, I was getting calls from the law office, wanting to know if I had heard from Sarah. Then, about 2 weeks later, the sheriff's office sent a detective out to take a statement. I referred him to my attorney. I showed him all of Sarah's crap, sitting by her car, waiting for her. I never heard from him again. It was about a month later that the feds came by, one night after I'd gotten off work. They had some interesting questions. "Do you know Jose Gonzalez?" "No." "Should I?" "How about Emmanuel Gonzalez?" "Nope." "Who are these guys?" The client Daniel Sterling was on his way to see in San Diego was Jose, who is Emmanuel's father. Paul had represented him in a drug trafficking case last year and had committed an error during the trial. He asked a question he did not know the answer to, and it opened a can of worms for his client Manuel. He was found guilty and sentenced to 50 years in federal prison. Jose wanted Paul to represent his son on an appeal that should have been a red flag. But Jose wired $100,000 to Paul's firm's account and asked him to come to Miami to discuss the case since he was sick and could not travel. Like an idiot, Paul thinks he is going to get more money for a big appeal, and he decides to take your wife, who he had been having an affair with for almost a year. Paul filled up his Corvette in town. We know this because he used his credit card. We think he then came out here and picked up your wife, and they started out for Miami. We cannot find another gas receipt, so the Colombians must have gotten to them before they stopped for gas or to eat. That's what we figure anyway. What does this Jose have to say about it? Nothing. He went into a hospital about a week after they disappeared, and he died 6 days later. We never got to question him on the matter. Well, I guess that means I can get rid of all her stuff. I have it in garbage bags in the garage. You are welcome to look through it if you want. That will not be necessary. We would like a copy of that letter she left, just for our files. No problem, I replied. I found them a copy of the letter, and they left. That was over 30 years ago, and I have not felt a disturbance in the force since the day I buried Sarah and Daniel under what is now my hog pen. That's my confession, and that's the end of my story. I never even considered getting rid of the hogs in my lifetime. It feels like they've earned it.